The grand arena of Velrath Prime shimmered beneath twin suns, a marvel of transparent alloys and floating platforms. Across 1,000,000 seats, species from the farthest edges of the known galaxy gathered, their chatter a cacophony of amusement and derision. At the center of it all, surrounded by colossal banners of the competing worlds, the human delegation prepared for the most important battle Earth had ever faced. Ambassador Reese Calder stood at the edge of the human staging platform, his arms crossed, gaze unwavering. His sharp uniform, the deep blue of Earth's diplomatic corps, seemed almost quaint among the vibrant armor and glistening organic plating of the other species. But Calder was not concerned with appearances. His focus rested on the tiny silver crates being positioned by robotic arms onto the battlefield. The announcement system boomed in a dozen languages, the translation weaving seamlessly into the ears of every listener, introducing Earth's champion, the tiny army. A ripple of laughter spread like wildfire through the stadium. Hulking Krivan generals barked guttural chuckles, while the serpentine Zorthal delegates coiled in gleeful disdain. Even the stoic Vexari tacticians allowed themselves a smirk, their long fingers tapping against armored chests. Calder heard it all and remained silent. It wasn't unexpected. On the opposite platform, Commander Thrask of the Krivan Dominion, today's opponent, leaned over the rail, flashing his carnivorous teeth. "Is this Earth's apology or their actual entry?" he sneered, voice projected across the arena. The laughter redoubled. At Calder's side, Colonel Mara Vance activated a small, unobtrusive control panel. From the silver crates, a series of ramps extended and onto the battlefield marched the tiny army. Thousands of figures, each scarcely taller than a Krivan's fingernail, advanced in perfect formation, shields gleaming, rifles poised with eerie precision. The crowd, already derisive, now roared with uncontained amusement. A few spectators mimed squashing motions with their feet. Others snapped images to stream across the galactic networks, headlines practically writing themselves. Calder, finally, allowed himself a smile, small, controlled, almost pitying. "They think it's a joke," Mara said quietly, her voice just loud enough for him to hear. "They always do," Calder replied. On the battlefield, the Krivan forces began deploying their own units. Massive, hulking biotanks adorned with living armor, accompanied by shock troops twice the size of a Terran elephant. The ground shuddered under their deployment, microquakes rippling outward, yet the tiny human soldiers stood unmoving, ranks tight, weapons at the ready. In the Krivan command booth, Thrask bellowed orders, still laughing. "Advance in formation. Do not engage yet. Let's savor this." The first wave of Krivan units moved forward, each step kicking up dust clouds large enough to obscure the tiny figures. Across the human platform, sensors mapped the battlefield in dazzling overlays. Mara watched with clinical interest, but Calder's attention remained locked on the crowd, on the smugness etched into every alien face. They weren't just laughing at the army. They were laughing at humanity. A chime sounded, the official beginning of the battle. The Krivan shock troops charged, their thunderous footfalls merging into a deafening rumble. Dust and debris whirled in their wake, creating a maelstrom through which the audience could barely see. Many assumed the tiny army would be crushed in seconds, trampled underfoot without even the dignity of resistance. Yet as the dust settled, the audience's laughter began to falter. The tiny figures had not moved from their formation. Instead, precise rows had split and reformed into an elegant lattice, a flexible net of units pivoting effortlessly around the massive feet of their enemies. Where a Krivan foot should have obliterated 10 soldiers, there was only air, and in its place, a glint of metal. A Krivan soldier stumbled, then another. Confusion flickered across Thrask's face as 2 biotanks suddenly groaned and collapsed, small explosions hissing up from internal joints. The arena screens zoomed in, revealing minute devices, impossibly small charges, attached to vulnerable spots. Whispers spread like a contagious fever. Spectators leaned forward, disbelief warring with curiosity. Thrask slammed his clawed fist into the command console. "They're using swarm tactics. Scatter. Smash everything." The Krivan formation dissolved into chaos as soldiers abandoned strategy in favor of brute force, flailing and stumping. Yet no matter how they tried, they could not seem to catch the tiny figures. They darted between armored legs, scaled biotanks like ants, vanished into gaps and appeared where least expected. Each movement was intentional. Each strike was devastating. "They are not drones," Mara said, voice tinged with awe now. Calder gave a slight nod. "No. They are better." On the arena monitors, a Krivan general was shown grappling with a cluster of tiny figures climbing his exosuit. His armor, built to withstand artillery, shrieked under the pinpoint attacks. Systems failed. Vital systems. With a final, sputtering whine, the general's suit exploded inward, dropping him like a puppet with its strings cut. The arena, once filled with derision, now fell into an uneasy silence. At the Krivan platform, Thrask snarled, his bravado crumbling. "This isn't possible. How can they?" He stopped, eyes wide with the dawning horror. High above the battlefield, a single communication drone hovered, amplifying a transmission. A voice rang clear and cold across the arena, tiny yet commanding. "Humanity adapts. Humanity endures. Underestimate us at your peril." The crowd was silent. Even the banners seemed to droop under the weight of the revelation. Calder finally turned away from the field, hands clasped behind his back. Beside him, Mara allowed herself the barest smirk. The humans had come to play a different game, and the galaxy was just beginning to understand how outmatched they truly were. In the distance, the second wave of the battle began to marshal, but the energy had shifted irreversibly. The laughing had stopped. Thrask roared, his voice crackling through the arena speakers. "Crush them! Tear them apart!" Panic saturated his commands, a stark contrast to his earlier mockery. Krivan forces surged with reckless abandon, no longer a disciplined army but a stampeding mass of fury and fear. Across the battlefield, the tiny army shifted formation again. Where once there had been rigid lines, now they flowed like water, small squads splitting, weaving between the lumbering feet of the enemy. Each movement was choreographed to the millisecond, each squad operating with uncanny autonomy, yet unmistakably part of a larger, invisible design. Mara Vance adjusted her display, fingers dancing across the holopad. "They are executing Phase 2 protocols," she murmured, half in awe, half in grim satisfaction. Calder said nothing. His eyes were locked on the screens, watching as history wrote itself in foot-tall increments. The Krivans began falling faster now. Explosions bloomed from joints and seams, not the large, cinematic bursts of heavy artillery, but surgical strikes, clean, precise, catastrophic. Massive warriors collapsed like felled trees, sometimes taking others down with them in tangled heaps of flailing limbs and crushed exosuits. High above the chaos, the audience shifted from stunned silence to a low, thrumming murmur. Disbelief melted into something far more dangerous: fascination. A squad of 6 tiny soldiers scaled the rear armor of a biotank, moving faster than any microdrones the galaxy had seen. In seconds, they reached a maintenance hatch, slicing through it with microplasma torches. Another few seconds, and the vehicle listed to the side, internal systems sabotaged. The tank's pilot, a creature bred for nothing but battle, screeched inside, trapped as his war machine crumpled from within. "How are they this effective?" a Vexary commentator whispered over the broadcast, the question carrying through every earpiece and holoscreen in the galaxy. Calder smiled thinly. The answer was simple, but he doubted they were ready to hear it yet. On the field, a Krivan major lumbered into view, flanked by 2 guard mechs. His armor gleamed with the latest adaptive tech, able to repair itself in real time, a masterpiece of Krivan engineering. He bellowed a challenge, slamming his fists together, generating shockwaves that flattened smaller obstacles around him. The tiny army did not retreat. Instead, a subset of soldiers broke away, rushing straight toward the giant with suicidal courage. Within moments, they disappeared beneath him, almost invisible against the scorched earth. The major laughed, a booming sound of certainty. Then he staggered. The arena feed zoomed in to reveal what he could not: hundreds of tiny charges embedded along the exosuit's flex points, already detonating in rapid succession. The self-repairing armor flickered, faltered, and failed. In seconds, the Krivan Major, champion of a dozen wars, crashed down onto his knees, then onto his face, unmoving. A single figure among the tiny soldiers turned to the audience and offered a sharp, deliberate salute. In the Krivan command booth, Thrask slammed his fists against the console, cracking its surface. "This isn't war," he snarled. This is sabotage. Treachery." Calder, watching, finally spoke. "No, Commander. This is evolution." Mara tapped her screen, bringing up a magnified feed. It displayed the soldiers up close, not drones, not automata, but humans, living, breathing, thinking. Their faces were visible beneath adaptive visors, young and old, men and women alike, every expression fierce with purpose. Micro-adaptation, full neural integrity, absolute combat efficiency, she recited softly, almost reverently. Humanity had solved the problem others hadn't even conceived. Miniaturization was not merely shrinking technology, it was shrinking the human form itself, preserving mind, strength, spirit. What they lacked in mass, they compensated for with speed, strategy, and sheer, relentless will. As Calder watched the battlefield tilt inexorably in humanity's favor, he knew the galaxy was witnessing something it could never forget. Thrask howled one final command: "Deploy the dreadnought." From the Krivan staging platform, the ground cracked apart, and a Titan rose, 50 meters tall, plated in reactive armor, bristling with weapons capable of leveling cities. The crowd gasped, some cheering, others falling into uneasy silence. Calder's expression did not change. Mara glanced at him. "Should I activate the final protocol?" He nodded once. The tiny army reorganized instantly. Where once they had flowed like water, now they became a spear, sharp, narrow, relentless. Squads formed microcolumns, overlapping shields that shimmered with kinetic dampeners. They moved toward the dreadnought without hesitation, ants before a god, but every step radiated certainty. A plasma cannon fired. Earth scorched. Several squads were vaporized in an instant. Still they advanced. A missile barrage followed. Anti-armor shells screamed overhead, tearing gouges into the ground. Tiny figures fell, but the formation adjusted, absorbing losses without faltering. Thrask leaned forward, desperation staining his features. "It doesn't matter how brave they are. They are too small to matter." Calder disagreed, and so did the battlefield. Upon reaching the dreadnought's base, the tiny army scattered, deploying grappling lines, ascension rigs, coordinated swarms. They attacked at every conceivable vulnerability: exhaust ports, sensor arrays, maintenance hatches. In under 3 minutes, the massive Titan, the pride of the Krivan war machine, was groaning and sparking under internal sabotage. An explosion tore through its midsection, rocking the platform. The dreadnought staggered, tried to correct itself, and then, impossibly, fell, its vast bulk crashing into the earth with a seismic roar that rattled teeth even in the highest tiers of the arena. The Krivan army broke. Panic rippled through their lines. Formations disintegrated. Soldiers ran without direction, fleeing the impossible, fleeing the tiny avatars of death they had once mocked. The announcer's voice, trembling with wonder, cut through the stunned silence: "Victory, to Earth." Thrask collapsed into his chair, staring blankly at the wreckage. Calder finally allowed himself a full smile, grim and unyielding. He turned to Mara, who was already powering down the battlefield systems. "It's over," she said. "Not yet," Calder replied, voice low. "Now, they will want to know how we did it." He glanced at the diplomatic envoys gathering behind the observation glass, Zorthals, Vexari, Turokans, all suddenly interested in alliances they had scoffed at hours earlier. Mara followed his gaze. "Let them wonder." Below, the remaining tiny army regrouped at the center of the battlefield, shields raised high in silent salute. Their victory was not just tactical. It was symbolic. Humanity had arrived. And this was only the beginning. The aftermath of Earth's victory unfolded in a silence more profound than any war cry. Across Velrath Prime's grand arena, The alien delegates, once so eager to mock, now conferred in hushed, urgent tones. Holographic transmissions zipped across sectors, desperate missives from homeworlds unprepared for the new reality they faced. Calder stood immobile at the observation deck, the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing against the back of his uniform. He could feel the hunger already, the surge of political predators who would mask fear behind offers of partnership and friendship. Earth, once an afterthought in galactic affairs, had become the most valuable, and most dangerous, piece on the board. Below, the remnants of the tiny army moved with methodical precision, recovering their wounded, securing prisoners, salvaging tech. They were not a victorious horde celebrating conquest, they were disciplined, professional, tireless. Humanity's message was not just that they could win, it was that they would win, efficiently, ruthlessly, again and again if necessary. Mara joined Calder at the railing, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, they simply watched, the distant crackle of damaged machinery and murmured commands rising faintly to their ears. "They'll come for us," Mara said finally, her voice almost conversational. "They already are," Calder answered. The first envoy approached, a Vexari dignitary with translucent skin shimmering in muted apology. He bowed deeply, the gesture one of submission rarely seen from his species. Behind him, a line of others formed, their faces stretched in diplomatic smiles that barely hid the calculation behind their eyes. Calder listened to the Vexari's practiced words, talks of mutual prosperity, shared advancement, unbreakable new alliances. He responded with polite nods, each one carefully measured. Earth had no intention of rushing into the old web of galactic power games. Not anymore. They would set the terms now. As the Vexari spoke, Calder's mind wandered to the soldiers below, the real architects of today's victory. He thought of the generations of work that had gone into their creation. The genetic engineering, the mind compression technologies, the endless simulations that had shaped them into weapons more perfect than any machine. They were not an army built for today's spectacle alone. They were humanity's future, tailored for the wars that hadn't yet begun. Another envoy stepped forward, this time a Zorthal, scales glittering under the arena lights. His offer was more direct, access to Zorthal biotech libraries in exchange for limited advisory roles from Earth's tactical divisions. Calder filed the words away, already imagining the negotiations that would stretch for months, maybe years. Earth would grant favors slowly, carefully, each one tying another world into quiet dependence. Victory on the battlefield had been essential. But true conquest would be political, economic, inevitable. Mara's hand twitched toward her belt, fingers brushing the encrypted datapad clipped there. It contained Earth's full military projections, future deployments, diplomatic targets, covert operations schedules. She kept it close, even now. Especially now. The roar of a secondary explosion snapped Calder's attention back to the field. A Krivan transport, rigged to self-destruct rather than be captured, burned bright against the dimming sky. Human squads had already moved in, suppressing the fire, retrieving any usable wreckage. Thrask was among the prisoners. Shackled in a containment field, stripped of his command insignias, he knelt in the dust, a figure diminished to near irrelevance. His eyes found Calder across the distance, blazing with hatred, confusion, and a desperate kind of awe. Calder met his gaze without emotion. It wasn't personal. It was survival. From the sidelines, cameras floated, capturing every angle for the galactic networks. The image of the tiny army standing victorious over the remains of the mighty Krivan force would be broadcast to billions before the sun set. And with it, the undeniable truth: Earth was no longer a fledgling participant in galactic affairs. It was an ascendant power. A low chime sounded at Calder's wrist, a private transmission from Earth's Prime Council. He accepted, a thin holographic interface unfolding silently. Councillor Yora's face appeared, her features framed by the rich reds of the Terran Assembly. "Congratulations, Ambassador," she said, voice clipped but not without warmth. "Stage 1 is complete. Authorization for Stage 2 is granted at your discretion." Calder nodded. No further elaboration was needed. He closed the channel. Mara caught the exchange. Are we moving now? Soon, Calder replied. We let them offer first. Let them think it's their idea. She smiled, a thin, dangerous smile that matched his own. From the arena floor, a new figure emerged from the human delegation, Captain Elias Ward, leader of the tiny army's deployed forces. His uniform bore the marks of battle, but his stance was unbroken, his gaze sharp. He saluted crisply, first toward Calder, then to the human flag that now floated above the grand arena. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. Ward's voice, amplified by internal comms, rang clear across the grounds. Victory secured. Standing by for next directive. Mara sent the acknowledgement through a secure channel. Calder simply inclined his head, a silent gesture of approval Ward would understand. As the human forces regrouped, preparing for extraction, Calder turned back to the gathered envoys. They were shifting nervously now, realizing that Earth's patience would be thinner than they had hoped. Good. Humanity had learned its lessons well. They had laughed at Earth, mocked it, dismissed it. But the laughter had faded. In its place was fear and opportunity. The tiny army had won the first battle. Now the real work would begin, reshaping the galaxy itself. And Calder intended to ensure that when history recorded this moment, it would mark the rise of not just a new power, but a new order, an order forged in steel, strategy, and the unbreakable will of the smallest soldiers ever to walk a battlefield. Far above, the banners of Earth's new alliances unfurled in the growing dusk. The future belonged to humanity. And they were just getting started. The diplomatic chambers of Velrath Prime had never hosted such an assembly. Delegates from over 60 systems crammed into the spiral halls, their voices a cacophony of fear, ambition, and hastily rewritten strategies. The victory of Earth's tiny army had thrown every balance of power into disarray, and now, amid shimmering banners and rattling honor guards, the galaxy's most influential beings sought a foothold on the new ground humanity had seized. Calder moved through the crowd like a shark among minnows. He wore no armor, no visible weapons, but the weight of Earth's sudden prestige clung to him like a second skin. Wherever he passed, conversations broke, heads dipped respectfully, even from species that had once barely acknowledged humanity's existence. Mara flanked him silently, her datapad alive with streams of information, trade offers, alliance proposals, veiled threats disguised as invitations to dialogue. She catalogued each one, her mind moving faster than the most advanced predictive AIS the galaxy could produce. At the central podium, High Arbiter Zelvar called the assembly to order, his ancient voice amplified by bioresonance fields. His 4 eyes blinked slowly as he surveyed the gathering. No one missed the subtle shift in his tone, the forced neutrality he adopted when he addressed Earth among the other powers. The Council recognizes Earth's ambassador, Zelvar announced. A low ripple of tension spread through the hall. Calder stepped forward, every motion deliberate. No hurry. No fear. Esteemed counselors, he began, voice clear and steady. Today, humanity extends not merely its hand, but its intent. The words hung in the air like a blade. He let the silence stretch, forcing every delegate to lean closer, to focus. Calder had learned long ago that in politics, power was not shown by speaking loudly, it was shown by making others listen. We are prepared to offer partnerships, he continued. Real partnerships. Based not on historical debts or ancient grievances, but on merit. On vision. Mara caught movement in the crowd, subtle nods from the younger worlds, from factions tired of old alliances that served only the few. Earth's victory had ignited a hunger larger than fear, it had sparked hope among the restless, the ambitious. But Calder also saw the hardening stays of the old empires, the Krivan remnants, the Vexari overlords, the Zorthal dynasties. They would never surrender power without blood. That was acceptable. Humanity had never expected an easy road. One of the elder delegates rose, a towering Chirokan with skin like molten stone. His voice boomed across the chamber. Earth's achievements are impressive, but isolated. One battle does not make an empire. Will you stake your future on miniature soldiers alone? Laughter rippled, thin and nervous. Calder allowed himself a slight smile. No, he said calmly. We will stake it on everything we are. And everything we are becoming. Mara sent the signal. In the space above the chamber, hidden seams peeled open, and holoprojectors bathed the ceiling in light. Scenes unfolded, fleets of microships darting faster than interceptors could track, colonies built in weeks by accelerated construction units no taller than a human hand, biotech fusions integrating human adaptability with alien resilience. A future being forged in thousands of hidden places while the galaxy had been busy laughing. The chamber fell into stunned silence. This is not a single battle, Calder said. It is the first ripple of a wave. Several delegates whispered furiously to aides. Others stared upward, faces pale. Earth had not merely produced an unbeatable army. They had appended the fundamental rules of expansion, warfare, and governance. The Turokan delegate sat down heavily, saying nothing more. Zelvar's aged voice cut through the hush. Does Earth propose dominance, or cooperation? Calder looked at the sea of faces, some terrified, some awed, all watching with desperate attention. He chose his next words with care. Cooperation, he said, for those who can evolve. For those who cannot, he let the threat linger, unspoken but clear. Time will decide. The assembly adjourned in a storm of motion. Some delegates rushed toward Earth's envoys, eager to carve out early deals. Others withdrew, faces grim, calculating their next moves. The seeds of new alliances, and inevitable future wars, had been sown. Mara moved beside Calder as they exited the chamber into the towering corridors beyond. The air here smelled cleaner, colder, designed to cleanse political stink before leaders returned to their private rooms. You think they'll choose cooperation? She asked. Enough will, Calder replied. The others will resist. They'll cling to the old ways until the galaxy grinds them to dust. They passed a series of stained glass windows depicting the galaxy's great historic moments: the fall of the Orion warlords, the first concordance of Talaris, the mass exodus from old Earth. New panels were already being commissioned. No doubt, one day, there would be one for this moment, when humanity stepped fully onto the galactic stage. As they reached the docking platforms, Captain Elias Ward was waiting, his uniform crisp, his posture radiating readiness. Behind him stood an honor guard, not full-size humans, but a detachment of the tiny army, newly promoted, still gleaming from the repairs made after the battle. Ward saluted sharply. All forces ready for redeployment, sir. Orders. Calder looked past him, at the gleaming ships that would carry Earth's future across the stars. Begin Phase 3, Calder said. Ward's eyes glinted. Understood. Without further ceremony, the humans boarded their transports, engines firing in perfect synchrony. As the ships rose into the star-choked sky, Mara glanced sideways at Calder. You ever think we moved too fast? She asked. He considered it for a heartbeat. No, he said. We moved exactly when we needed to. Fast enough that they couldn't stop us. Slow enough that they never saw it coming. The stars swallowed them. Behind them, the galaxy trembled on the edge of a new age.